Hello everybody. Welcome and thank you all very much for coming. Hopefully you do know by now who I am. If you're wondering why there are all these empty seats here, that's because in a few minutes I'll be joined by my colleagues who will help me to answer the more difficult questions you might have for me. So I thought I'd begin with the sort of negative and hopefully become more positive as we go along. And none of these three are particularly positive, I'm afraid to say. I'll comment no further on Brexit because I don't think I know any more than you do. On the pension, we have submitted a response that would buy a little time where we hope that this might improve the situation. You may have seen the Augar review that assessed post-18 education and funding last week. There has been actually quite a lot of criticism of it in the press and a view that it may actually not happen for various political reasons, but I'm happy, or others could answer questions on that. But in spite of these negatives, there are many successes for the sector and indeed for this university, and also a lot of opportunities. Just to highlight one, there's been a lot of worry about recruitment of students into the sector, and indeed applications are level with last year across universities, while this university is up by about 10% from home students and almost 20% from international students, which is extremely promising. We, every year, report on our successes and things that have gone less well in our annual stocktake report. If you haven't seen this, there are hard copies around. It's also available online, and we report this to the Board of Governors who assess how we've done. And they agreed there were some great successes. There were some things we didn't do as well in, although they acknowledged that we had quite testing targets. There was some concern over student experience, the National Student Satisfaction Survey, but you have to put that in context. The whole sector went down, so actually, relatively, we didn't do badly. Obviously, creating financial headroom because our costs are going up and there is a very modest increase in income growth. So just about all of our costs are going up at or above inflation, while many of our income streams are staying flat, not even meeting inflation. So some of you will have seen the results of the staff survey for 2019 have just been released. They're online. These are the headline results, and I'll just summarise them very briefly for you. We had a 69% response rate. It was lower than we'd hoped for. We'd hoped for 75%, but 69% still gives us a very robust analysis. 92% versus 93% last year said the university is a good place to work, and 89% feel proud to work for the university. I actually found these results quite surprising and reassuring given the events that have occurred over the last 2 years since the last staff survey, although there is no room for complacency. We're just analysing now the below headline results, and one of the things that is clear from that is that in general, professional services staff are more happier and respond more positively than academic staff. I think that's probably true the sector over. Then the most improved areas were taking part in work-related learning and development, 19% increase, zero tolerance to bullying and harassment, 7% increase, awareness of our dignity at work, and awareness of university well-being. So these were all positive. There were, of course, some negative responses also. These are all available online. Change management, people were unhappy with change management, a 6% decrease to more than 48%. I don't know if that is unhappy with the change or with how we manage it, but we'll go through all the comments. Senior leadership team, that's us. Listening, responding to staff, 5% decrease to 42%. That's in spite of quite big efforts just recently, maybe too recently, including events like this, and communicating well, a decrease. Communication in general, 6% decrease to 56%. That's unusual because in other places, the very high scores on things like I know what's expected of me, I agree with the university's goal, my line manager engages with me. So that's quite a difficult one. Stress at work, an increase, which is worrying. So now what we will be doing is communications across the university and obviously engagement of senior staff. We need to address a positive working environment for staff, well-being, and of course managing change. And the headlines results have been released. Now we'll have groups to work on action plans for university-wide themes, led by members of SLT. Local leaders will get their results on and work on action plans. And now we're going to do the staff survey every 3 years because it's quite a big thing, but we're going to do shorter and more frequent pulse surveys. carried out intermittently so that we get a more ongoing assessment. Many of you will have been involved in the discussions and consultation around our next strategic purpose, vision and plan, known as Our Future. Some of you may have seen that we have now developed our purpose, which is to advance education, knowledge and wisdom for the good of society. And that is going to the Board of Governors, hopefully to be signed off in July. This hasn't changed dramatically. Actually, many of you wanted some things to stay the same. A notable change in our vision, and as you'll see on the next slide, is we don't refer to our staff and our students, or our people and our students, because there was a strong view expressed that our students are our people, so that they should be classed together. The other notable change is we've added the environment to society, because we think that's of importance. So this visual depiction puts at the centre our people, our values, which we're working on now, and we welcome your views on our values. The three core themes that we have now were robustly maintained. Almost the vast majority wanted to retain the three goals of research and discovery, teaching and learning, and social responsibility. And in the staff survey, the sign-up to those three goals was 97 or 98%. So it seemed foolish to change them. But we have around that three cross-cutting themes: innovation, civic engagement and global influence. And we'll be working on the details for each of those, where it's already fairly advanced, and indeed there'll be developments of the strategic plans in the near future. So it might seem a bit of a harsh environment at the moment, whether politically, and I shouldn't ignore the fact that Trump is visiting the UK today, whatever that says about politics, but there are many opportunities. Some of these are opportunities across the sector, but many of them are specific to Manchester. Health devolution to Greater Manchester region is still a really important opportunity. We have growing international links, and as I mentioned, many international students wanting to study. We're told by others that we're good at interdisciplinary research and teaching. That's grand challenges, cross-cutting themes, and of course in teaching not only within their own programmes, but University College for Interdisciplinary Learning. We could probably do a lot more. Social responsibility was held as very important and distinctive by many in the staff survey. As I mentioned, student recruitment's going well. Distance learning is taking off, but more slowly than we would like. Stellify, of course, is the programme for students, which is increasingly being taken up. Graphene City is our ambitious plans for commercialisation of graphene and other two-dimensional materials to really make a step up in that commercialisation. And ID Manchester, which some of you will have heard about, is the plans for development of our North Campus. We are not planning to sell the North Campus site when we vacate most of it to move into the ever-growing MECD, Manchester Engineering Campus development, but we are seeking a commercial partner to develop an innovation district. And I'll leave you with a very short film that describes Innovation District at Manchester while my colleagues join me.
Manchester is one of the fastest growing cities in Europe. It's a city built on innovation. At its heart is the University of Manchester, a research powerhouse for nearly 200 years. It was here that the atom was split, the modern computer was born, and where graphene was first isolated. Building upon this rich heritage, we're looking for a partner to work with us to transform our city centre and create a new £1.5 billion innovation district. Welcome to ID Manchester. This is a truly international city with a unique talent pool, booming economy and diverse culture. ID Manchester is the most connected site in the north of England, adjacent to the city's major rail hub and future HS2 station. Unmatched in its size, scale and location, ID Manchester will be a place where innovation and business will thrive in a vibrant, connected and sustainable new neighbourhood. This is a unique opportunity to partner with one of the world's leading universities to create a new kind of innovation district at the heart of Manchester, the original modern city. This will be a place like no other, a place for innovators, a place for pioneers. ID Manchester, where ideas become reality.
So I hope you noticed from the pictures that Sackville Street building will remain intact. Many people think we're going to knock it down, which we're not. So thank you. I'm going to get my colleagues to come up and join me now. And open to questions about anything I've spoken about or anything else hopefully relevant to the university. We'll struggle with other things, but what I'm going to do is get them to introduce themselves. You probably know many of them, but possibly not all. So, Patrick.
Hello everyone, I'm Patrick Hackett, I'm the Chief Operating Officer.
And Registrar.
And Registrar, that's it. Keep going.
Hello everyone, I'm Martin Schroeder. I'm a Professor of Chemistry and Dean of the Faculty of Science and Engineering.
Hi, I'm Colette Fagan, Vice President for Research and a Professor in Social Science.
Hi, I'm Karen Heaton. I'm the Director of Human Resources.
Afternoon, I'm Steve Dauncey, Director of Finance.
Hi, I'm James Thompson, Vice President for Social Responsibility and Professor of Theatre Studies.
Clive Agnew, Vice President for Teaching and Learning Students and still a geographer.
Hi, I'm Luke Georgiou, Deputy President and Professor in the Business School.
And I should have said I'm Professor of Physiology as well. So, two colleagues are missing. Graham Lord, Vice President and Dean of the Faculty of Biology, Medicine and Health, who is away at a meeting, and Professor Keith Brown, Vice President and Dean of the Faculty of Humanities. They couldn't be here because they're not in Manchester. So, now, who's going to be the first brave person to ask a question? We have got roving microphones, and I will direct, as I said, all the difficult ones to my colleagues. This was difficult to ask the first one. Yes, thank you.
Hello, John Broderick from the School of Mechanical, Aerospace and Civil Engineering. The university has recently signed up to support the city in its efforts towards going zero carbon and making substantial emissions reductions in the near term towards that. I'd like to know what the SLT think we should do in each of the different business areas. What will be different as a result of making this commitment to work with the city?
Who's going to go first? James.
Sounds like, thank you, John. I thought I was going to get a number of questions on this particular area, but thanks for teeing that up. This is a really important part of the future, well, the current strategy of the university and the future strategy. Just in terms of background, one of the things that really came out of the Our Future consultation was the number of staff and the number of teams of staff who put forward the importance of having a real clear statement about the environment in our new strategy. And also this came at a similar time that the city and Greater Manchester were looking at their carbon commitments, and I know colleagues in the Tyndall Centre did a huge amount of work to actually start working with the city on what those carbon commitments would be. Already, I think we've made a commitment to reducing our carbon simply through the move from the North Campus to this single campus. So that, in many ways, there was a number of reasons for it, but one of the key reasons was a sustainability argument to say that newer buildings on one site were going to be better and more carbon efficient than some of the older buildings we have on North Campus. So that's one thing. The new buildings we already have are going to be better. I think then we're going to have, in a sense, two sets of activities. One is thinking about how we build and create a more closer to zero carbon infrastructure around the university, but then also how we work with staff on issues of behaviour change, because there's a huge amount that our staff can do in the buildings that they work and operate within. So I think we're going to start looking at a university plan in this area, but then very specific plans for each particular area, whether it's operations, whether it's research, whether it's teaching and learning. One thing we will be balancing always is trying to think that our students and our research will contribute to a zero carbon future as much as we in terms of the infrastructure and the operations that we manage. So we're trying to have to work out how we balance our supporting researchers who are going to really pioneer those solutions that are going to make the society closer to zero carbon, coupled with an institution that has big old buildings that we've got to manage and we've got to rationalise in some way.
And you've probably noticed, I hope, that there's a lot more green on the campus now. That's been intentional. Much greater use of bicycles, but also, as James pointed out, we have a huge amount of research that will help to deliver those goals, whether it's batteries or new materials or work on microplastics. Thank you.
Do you want me to add something?
Yeah,
just on the teaching front, because I think that's another dimension to this. And I think there's two areas that's worthwhile thinking about. Currently, we're not planning, notwithstanding Augur, to change the current configuration of students on campus. It's a fairly stable picture going forward. But a lot of growth, I think, can be through the online and blended learning areas, and I think we can look at that in terms of reducing particularly travel. I think the other aspect as well is, that's come through Our Future, is the idea of actually landing more awareness on the Sustainability Development Goals in our curricula. And James and I have been discussing how we could actually do that going forward.
Okay, others? Yes, one right over there on the other talk.
Hi, my name's John. I won't hold it that close. My name's John Walker. I'm a user experience designer. With our expansion into distance learning and more digital based media, we've got a well-defined and mature policy around our accessibility promise to people who attend the campus physically, but we've not got an accessibility policy for people who access our services digitally. So I was wondering, with the expansion into digital, was there any ambition to really define what that promise is for our digital products to those requiring assistive technology?
So obviously we do provide access to some of our digital technologies because we do have quite a lot of distance learning now, but I think there's more planned for the future. I don't know if Patrick or Clive want to answer that. Yeah.
We do start off. I think it's actually a really interesting question and very challenging. There's various dimensions to this. One is we do actually have the Equity and Merit Awards, where we actually do support access overseas, but it's not a significant element, and I think we could do more in that area. I think one of the things that I think is interesting in terms of access digital, from my perspective, at the moment we are focused on postgraduate. And quite often when you talk about access, we talk about undergraduate, and I think that's something which we haven't really addressed, is the postgraduate side of things. So I welcome your challenge, and I'll see if we can respond to that.
Thank you. Who else? Mr. will have lots of questions. Have you all read the 200-page Auger report? Right at the back. I think it's Beresford.
Ian Fair with the Faculty of Humanities. I think we might have two questions at the same time.
Oh, right, just one here first, and then we'll go there. Yes, sorry, yes.
Ian Fair with the Faculty of Humanities. You just mentioned the Auger report. I realise it's very early days, but I just wondered what senior leadership team's first thoughts about the implications of the report for the university are.
So, I'll make comment, but Steve might also want to comment. So, obviously, there's some good things in the report. You know, we very much support the suggested investment in further education, which has suffered. We'd very much support reintroduction of maintenance grants. I don't think our students would support reducing the threshold for repayment. Obviously, the big one, the worry, is the £7,500 fee cap. You may have seen, or may not have wanted to see, lots of analyses of it by Martin Lewis from Money Expert, Institute for Fiscal Studies, London Economics, all arguing it's going to cost money. So there are three issues, I think, around it at the moment, and I'll say if implemented, and Steve can say the consequences if it is implemented, although we're still guessing. First, it was commissioned by Theresa May, who is not going to be Prime Minister for much longer, so her successor has got to decide if they want to pick it up along with Brexit. Second, if it needs extra money, it's got to go through the Comprehensive Spending Review at a time when there isn't going to be very much money. And third, a reduction in fee levels requires being passed by Parliament, and we don't think it will be passed by Parliament. So we actually don't think, in its entirety, it's going to go through. Having said that, there are things just like freezing the fee for 3 years. That could go through, and that's got a not insignificant implication to our income at a time when, you know, the fee hasn't really gone up by very much, and so it's been eroded by inflation. So we've done some horrible calculations. I don't think we're at the horrible end, are we, Steve? But we're at the still potentially worrying.
Yeah, I think that's probably where I'd be. We've done some fairly horrible modelling to say what would we need to do and sort of address the loss of income that a 7,500 fee would bring in. But actually, as written, the Auger review is saying, well, it'll take time for that to come in, and there will be support from government in that intervening period, so the funding of a unit assessment would remain the same. Well, so if it was implemented as written, you could say this is something we can manage our way through and plan our way through to a future where income levels would be less. I think the reality is I don't personally see that that's ever going to be the case, that it wouldn't all be implemented in one go. But there again, I think we've got to just politically look at things anyway where we have a Labour government potentially still looking at a free education. What would that mean? So how is this affordable? So I think some of the thinking we're doing needs to continue, and it needs to inform our existing 5-year plans. But I suppose the one thing I'm not seeing out of that announcement is a cliff edge, which really worried us. But we've yet to see how students might react to it. We've got to put encouraging messages out. There is certainty there for 2 years when we're doing student visits, etc., when we're talking to our prospective candidates, so that they're not thinking about changing their behaviours for this. Students' union feedback would sense that they probably wouldn't anyway at a reduction of 2,000. Would you put off a great education at the University of Manchester for that, when that's uncertain how long that would go on for? So not as bad as I feared, but quite a lot of work to do and quite a lot of thinking.
So Luke spotted what looks like a fairly fatal flaw in the argument. Do you want to comment, Luke, which publicly hasn't come out, actually?
Well, it recognises that our costs are going to go up through pensions, loss of EU students and so on, and then suggests that's okay because universities can take more home students to cover those costs when those home students would be taken on at an effective loss. So very poor economics in the report.
So they commissioned a big report by KPMG which said, on average, across the sector, the cheapest degrees cost over £8,000. So taking on more students at 7,500 doesn't seem to make sense. And look, back now. Is that on?
Hello, are you hearing me now?
Oh,
thank you.
Good.
Yeah, my name is Bradford Edwards. I'm from the main library. So one of our KPIs from 2016, Manchester 2020 plan, is to address the disproportionate representation of BAME individuals in more senior positions. As evidenced by today's panel, we have not managed to make much headway in this sense. Clearly, existing interventions are not impactful in this regard. What plans, if any, are there to address this?
Yeah. Fair comment. Karen? Yeah, I think that's or Karen and James, actually. Yeah, probably. Yeah.
I think that is a very fair comment, and it's certainly one that we're not particularly happy with. We're not happy with the situation either. We are taking a complete refresh of our equality, diversity and inclusion agenda, approach and strategy, so that we can actually get some pace into what we're trying to achieve. And there's been quite a lot of progress, but it's slow progress, and we need to make more progress, and we need to be accelerating this agenda. So I totally support the need to put more effort into this and to get everybody signed up and start to get more staff of all diversity at different levels across the university.
Thanks ever so much, Beresford. And Beresford's coming to the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Leadership Group next week, so we can talk more about this. I think it's absolutely, it's a fair comment, and we need to do a lot more. We're really pleased that we've just had our Race Charter, our Bronze Award renewed. We are one of 12 institutions only nationally that have that award, which in terms of the sector shows how limited action within equality, diversity, inclusion, particularly for Black, Asian, minority ethnic staff, has been taken across the sector. I think as we go lower than the senior leadership team, you're starting to see faculty leadership teams, school leadership teams with a much better level of Black, Asian, minority ethnic representation. And that's a real sign that there are some fantastic BAME leaders across this institution that will take their place appropriately at different leadership levels. And that's something that we should all be sort of really looking to support.
Patrick, Beresford, I know we've talked about this briefly before, but from my perspective, we also have to look outside the university to recruitment. And I know sometimes colleagues feel that we should look to only have recruitment internally, but that only reinforces the status quo. And also, I think, as a university and as a sector, we need to look outside the sector and encourage colleagues from other sectors to join us. And I think real positive action like that will make a difference.
Thank you. Others? Got one there, and then one in the middle, one on the left, one at the back. Right, we're getting
Now
going
we're getting
there.
going.
Yeah, okay, right. Over there. Yeah.
I'll try and make it brief then. Dan Rigby from Economics. I wanted to ask about the financial performance of the university. So a couple of weeks ago, Moody's changed the credit assessment of Leeds, Southampton, Liverpool, etc., and changed them from their existing negative assessment to stable, but it held Manchester at the negative.
Yep.
So given that those other universities are all facing the same pressures around Augar and Brexit and pensions, I wondered what your assessment was of why Manchester was held negative rather than stable.
So I'll let Steve answer that, but as you will know, of course, we're ranked higher than those other universities anyway. We're a grade higher. So had we been a grade lower, we probably would have been stable. So, but do you want to add to that?
Yes.
Yeah, we've talked to Moody's a lot about it.
So that point, we're AA2 and other universities, Oxford's at AA3. So that's a sign of our, if you like, size and strength and resilience anyway. So the negative, when we were talking to Moody's, it was very interesting. We weren't too sure. Of course, we didn't know what they were going to do to the other eight rated institutions. So we have remained negative, as did Cardiff, interestingly enough, and Cardiff were covered in the FT. And that negative is in our own right, as opposed to being previously associated with sovereign wealth, which was negative. So the wording is they're looking at our operating cash flows, the level of surplus we're generating, and they're really saying we're more at risk because we're actually the margins we're generating now, that's up 2.5% or 3%, are very, very tight. And they do comment about a deterioration in our wealth, which surprised us a bit, because in wealth in terms of cash holdings, because we had the cash holdings to actually deliver the capital investment we've been going through. So we're a bit surprised on some of the wording, but this is their view. It's actually it's actually probably aligned with my view. I'm going around faculties, I'm going around school boards talking about some of the financial sustainability challenges we have. And actually we need to improve our operating performance against a target of 5 to 7%. We're not where I would like us to be, where we all believe we should be. But then we've got to take some difficult decisions to do that. We're going to have a full Moody's review in a couple of weeks' time. So this was done over a phone as they looked at re-rating the whole sector, and we'll see what comes out of that. So at one stage, I was concerned, would they downrate us and actually say our performance isn't good enough. At the moment, they're just holding it. So it just plays into, I think Nancy mentioned it right at the beginning, financial sustainability of this institution and the sector is challenging. And our performance is not where I think it should be. And it's not hitting the projections that we laid out a few years ago. So they're just playing back what we already knew.
Could I just add one other factor, and we don't know if this is playing into their thinking, but it's certainly playing into our thinking. We have much bigger research activity than some of the others, and all universities are losing money on research, very significantly. And so that's actually, the more research active you are, the more it challenges you financially, because it's only about just over 70% recovery of costs. Yeah. So that might be another factor. What was the next one? There's one in the middle here. Has anybody got a microphone now?
Just on that point, I'm saying, what did strike me is interesting is, given the winds of change, the challenges we've got in front, I was surprised that others went to stable. Because we have the size of resilience, so actually I think so that surprised me, but I haven't analysed all their individual comments yet. So I will be, because I'm going to be asked by the board for that very question.
Yes. You're in the middle.
Hi, Kathy Gelbin, Department of Drama. I had a question about ID Manchester, and I'm wondering about the envisioned role of the humanities, and particularly our Creative Manchester initiative in the School of Arts, Languages and Cultures, and what role that would play in the ID Manchester scheme, and also where the funding for ID Manchester will come from.
Okay, so I'm probably, or Luke, but the funding, none of it will come from the university, none at all. That's why we're not a property developer, we haven't got £1.5 billion. That's why we'll go in with a commercial partner. So to some extent, the commercial partner will dictate what is on the site. Of course, you know, the upfront will be, we want innovative companies. That's what it's for, an innovation district, startup. And that will be for humanities as well as science, health, everything else. There's a limited space in the middle that will be public space, that will feature humanities as well. But because we'll be the minority shareholder, we won't be able to call all the shots. Have you talked any more about Patrick? Luke or Patrick might comment.
Well, I mean, I could say, as well as the companies, and among the key themes will be trying to attract digital companies, some of which are in the creative sector. We want it to be a place which has life and people on it, and almost certainly that will involve some cultural and entertainment and leisure activity as well. And some, of course, a green field too.
Okay. We had some more hands up. I've lost them. One right at the back, and then I think there's one over there as well. One right at the back.
Hello, my name's Tom Rayworth from IT Services. Just got a question about fixed-term contracts. We seem to have a lot of people ending in the next 60 days before start of year, but some of the replacement services aren't live or won't be live for start of year. How will that be managed from the leadership team?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
No, I didn't quite catch that. Were you saying that we've got some fixed-term contracts ending and there's a gap?
About 20 plus in professional services that they're finishing, that the roles still exist. There's been no real extension of those roles going forward, but some of them are going to be covered under EUC or ROC with the hybrid schemes. But those services don't seem to be live or won't seem to be going live for start of the year. I'm just wondering how that's going to be managed.
Okay.
Well, I can't answer that in detail here, but I'm more than happy to take it away and contact you directly after today to explain to you what the plan is that we will have in place, because I'm sure we're not going to leave a gap in our services.
Malcolm's not here, is he? Yeah. Okay, we'll have to come back to you on that one. There was one over here. Yes.
Hi, Sandra Taylor. I'm a senior research technician. I just want to say, on behalf of, I'm sure, all technicians, I really appreciate that on the staff survey this year that we do now count as a category of staff, so thank you very much to the leadership team for that.
And quite a happy category, I should say.
And kind of relating to that a little, again, we're pleased that the university signed up for technician commitment, and wondered if the leadership team would like to comment on how they see that being rolled out across Manchester.
Oh, Martin, you've got lots of technicians, haven't you?
Well, technicians are the lifeblood of the Faculty of Science and Engineering and also of BMH and elsewhere. I mean, they're very important and they need to be recognised more, in my view. I think we take technicians for granted in some ways. But at the same time, we need to fund technicians, and we have a lot of very expensive facilities that take money to run, and we need to get that income in, the overhead and the support for technicians. And going back to what Nancy said earlier, in terms of EPSRC funding, we are currently #1 in the country. But actually, our total income from EPSRC is actually reduced compared with last year because there's less money available in the pot, which gives you a financial challenge in order to support our services, our facilities, and our technicians as best as we can.
Thank you.
I'd also add to that we recognise there are, challenges around career progression and rewarding and recognising expertise in a way that's recognised differently in other professional services categories, and that's something that we're going to work on to make sure that we can recognise and reward excellence.
Any other hands up? Yes, there's one right at the back and one in the middle that I can see, and maybe one over to the right, I'm not sure. So, was that one? Yeah.
Hi, Rachel Mutters, Faculty Careers Manager for Science and Engineering. Can we have an update on SLP timelines and what's going on? Because we haven't heard anything for a very long time. I'm just wondering what's going on.
I think that's you, Clive.
Well, actually, this morning I got an email from Malcolm basically saying that we're right for the launch of Phase 1, which is July. So we're ready for that. And also Phase 2, October. We're ready for that as well. So that's all looking good. We've done what they call the integrated testing and the user testing. That's all looking well. And then we start looking for the next bit, which is to roll out. So just for those who are not familiar with the approach is that we're doing marketing and admissions as the first two phases that roll out. So I've got to say at the moment, the message I got this morning is that everything's absolutely on track, which is really reassuring. But I will take your point, because I've got a meeting on Monday to say that colleagues feel they're not being told enough about it, and I'll take that forward and feed it in. Thank you.
And I'd add to this that we're not just looking at SLP in isolation. We need to think about all the staffing implications that go along with SLP, the new leadership model, a new management model. And we're working hard to make sure that these two things are properly integrated. I think that's something that we would acknowledge that we haven't achieved up until now. But we have appointed into the new senior leadership roles in these areas, and they will now work with us to roll out the next stages of the organisational model. I think that's going to be critical to success, and we have to find a way of making sure that we're able to gain the benefits of SLP at the same time as delivering business as usual, at the same time as implementing a new organisational model. And that's going to be quite a challenge for everyone. There's a lot of work going on in the background about this at the moment, and that will be partly why you feel you're not hearing enough about it. But I'm sure you will be hearing more detail very, very soon.
Sounds like you should do. Was the one over here? Yes, right at the back.
Hi, thanks. Kind of segues slightly on with the previous question, sticking on student experience. But in light of things that we've heard in the news this week about Angela Ruskin and students seemingly to be successful at challenging what value for money they get and taking that to court, hopefully the university won't find themselves in a similar position. But how do we balance the kind of demands that we have on our students, quite rightly, in delivering a kind of world-class student experience with not kind of pandering to student expectations in a way where we kind of can do no wrong? There's a balance there. I think we strike it most of the time, but I think we're in danger of kind of engendering a culture which allows students to do no wrong.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question, and it's really difficult to answer. I mean, you gave the Anglia Ruskin example. I hope we wouldn't be in that position because we have such high employability amongst our students, which I don't think Anglia Ruskin is in quite that fortunate position. But yeah, it's really difficult in meeting students' expectations, but sometimes just pushing back and saying, no, you've got to go and find that out for yourself. Sorry, you know, you're here to learn, not just to be taught. So, I don't know if Clive again wants to say something. It's difficult.
It is. I think it's a good question to challenge us. But I think when we recently had a meeting of the teaching and learning group and saying, you know, what are we about? What are we trying to do here? The one thing that really came through very strongly is challenge and transform. And I don't want to lose that, because I think if we don't challenge our students, but also give them a transformative experience, then we've basically failed. But we should challenge, not just basically provide.
So this is an area where I worry about the National Student Satisfaction Survey, because there's some evidence, it's not robust, but there's some evidence that students mark up courses that they find easier. And of course, we don't want to do that just to get a better score in the NSS. We want to stretch our students and make sure they leave, you know, having really gained something. So I think, and I also worry about the value for money. I mean, that came out really strongly in the Auger report. So much of it was about how much are they going to earn and how much are they going to pay back. Those things are really important, of course they are. But, you know, if we're just reduced to, you know, how many pounds for how many lectures, gosh, you know, we're pretty much wasting our time, aren't we? They're not getting more than that.
July 3rd, that's when the NSS results come out this year, so...
3rd, yeah.
Ask me again.
Earlier than usual. Yeah, less than a month. Other questions? What time, yes? One in the middle? Oh, one there, and then one over this side, yeah?
Hi, it's Lucy Nixon, IT Services. I just had a couple of observations, really. One was the price of food on campus. A cheese sandwich is about £3 in some of the venues, which I know it's, you know, there are other places to kind of shop now, which is really good. We've got the Co-op, you know, you can get a meal deal. But I think it's just quite shocking sometimes when you know, you are charged quite a significant fee for a coffee or a sandwich. obviously that's an experience of our students and our staff. And the other observation was that I do book a lot of meeting rooms and teaching spaces, and do find it challenging to find the space. However, I can walk around campus and see that many rooms are vacant. Now, we have a massive estate and we have loads of rooms and loads of space, but I don't know if we're maximising the estate that we have. And those are the two observations I had I wanted to put to the panel.
So, probably Patrick's best to answer on teaching spaces, which is a real issue. People book spaces and don't use them. But and you'll probably want to say something about food on campus, not least because we lose money on it. It's very easy to explain why it's expensive compared to private providers. We pay above the living wage. We give good sickness benefit, maternity leave, compassionate leave, pensions. We try and source locally. We try and source sustainably. We're trying to reduce the use of plastics. We try to recycle the food. All that comes at a cost, and it makes it more expensive than private providers. And I think it's right we should do that. But, you know, we can't afford to keep making a loss on it. But there's lots of, I don't know if you want to add to that, but, you know, there are good reasons why we won't compete.
Yeah, I think we can't afford to make a loss on food on campus. You know, we've just had a conversation about value for money for our students and others. And one of the challenges we face is that we have over 30 different outlets across the university at a time when, as you've pointed out, we have some new external providers coming on campus as well, which I think is a very welcome introduction to the estate. So this is something that we are actively looking at right now as part of our budgeting process for the next year. I think we're going to have to face up to the reality that we can't have as many outlets as we do have on campus. We need to make sure that the ones we have got deliver value for money and that they contribute in that way to the university. On teaching accommodation, or teaching rooms or meeting rooms, again, you know, I can't disagree with your observation. We have many centralised rooms, and they're always under pressure. Interestingly, they're under pressure, you know, between certain hours during the day. If you want one on a Monday morning early, you'll find it, or Friday afternoon, you will be able to find it. But we also have a lot of rooms that are not centrally bookable. And so we're not using our facilities as efficiently as we can do them. And I think, again, you know, when we think about value for money, we have a responsibility to ensure that we do use our facilities as efficiently as we can use them.
I saw another one somewhere. Oh, yes, got two in the middle. Two on the same row. So if you want to pass the microphone along and get there first. Oh, right, okay. Very gentlemanly.
Michelle Kipling, Alliance MBS. I've been very fortunate to attend leading at Manchester, and I've got members of my team that have attended managing at Manchester. I can see the impact from my team members who have attended those programmes and implementing things that they've taken on board, and personally myself as well. How would you, I think that, if I'm wrong, I might be wrong, but these programmes, including ILP, were introduced from the staff survey last time.
Yep.
What does success look like for you in terms of those that have attended ILP?
I was going to get Karen to answer this, but since you said what does success look like to me, I think it's people, leaders, managers, who feel more empowered, who feel more able to lead their teams, to make decisions, because we know one of the things that stops us getting things done is people not feeling they can make a decision and wanting to pass it along. And we hope that now they can make those decisions. I hope they're better informed and feel more engaged about the university and have a better understanding of it and how it works, because we are complicated organisations. But do you want to add any of the other goals?
Yeah, I think I'm really pleased that you talk about it in a positive way, because that's absolutely great, and it's a real investment. And I think it's about making sure that we all speak with a common language. We understand the goals of the university, we share that, but as you as leaders and managers can see an impact in your own managers as well, that there is a difference in the way that they operate and the way that the staff feel about how they're managed and how they're led and being well led. So it's starting to achieve what we had hoped it would achieve, and those comments are great to hear. Thank you.
You mentioned the campus gets greener, not if I look out of my window.
Okay.
It's really expanding continuously, and it's a big construction site. It's not a green campus. But my question is, you mentioned that the confidence in SLT is round about 42%, correct?
Sorry, the
confidence in
no, it
from
wasn't
the staff survey.
No, it wasn't confidence. It was, but you could argue it's confidence. It was listening, I think. Yeah, listening.
Because this sounds hugely alarming. So
It's above the sector average, but yes, it is worrying.
What would be the consequences of
Sorry?
that?
Listening to staff, listening and responding to staff, and that is 42%.
Which sounds quite alarming. What will be the consequences of that?
The consequences are we already have started events like these, wider engagement. Obviously, we'll be looking at where those, because the responses vary enormously. We haven't analysed them all in full, but they vary enormously across different parts of the university. I think what understanding the comments and what is behind that, is it that people think that we listen but we don't act, or we just don't hear, or we don't invite comment, or we don't have events like these, or we don't have places for people to feed in. So I think we need to explore it a bit more and then obviously try and rectify that. It is a feature generally. I just read a piece today about confidence across leaders in sectors, and it's at an all-time low in all sectors in the UK. Not saying that's necessarily an excuse why we should be lower, but...
And I think they've highlighted two particular areas of concern, but there's a more general question asking whether the SLT leads the university well, a more general, rounded question in a way. And the response for that was 72%, which is down on last time, which I think was perhaps expected. But when you compare it to the benchmark for the sector, it's 72 versus 64% for higher education. So in that sense, relatively speaking, it's more highly rated than other institutions.
If I could add that we, of course, visit schools. There's dean's visits. Members of SLT regularly visit all the schools, open fora. I think we will do more of that. Sometimes we need to communicate better, but I have to say, when we do communicate, sometimes the pushback is that people don't like the message.
It's a fair comment. And there are other parts of the survey that we will have to take note of where the scores are low, or they've fallen, or certain parts of the university they're particularly low. And we'll be doing all of that analysis, as I mentioned in my talk. Somebody at the... Yes, just behind.
Hi, it's Vicky Ackley from DSE. You mentioned earlier about value for money and the fact that the value to the students needs to be more than just learning and just getting a good job. I wondered, in terms of the interactions that you have with students, in terms of gaining their feedback, and the paper that's been tabled to the board from Fatima, General Secretary of the SGE, if there's any general themes emerging in terms of what our students value?
Yeah, I mean, Clive's obviously best to answer that, but to me, personal approaches is always really important. People knowing who they are, feeling that they're supported and known. Would they be key? Do you want to add?
Sure. I mean, I think Fatima's paper is actually really has been very well received.
It was
we
very
discussed
good.
it yesterday.
Very good.
I think it's been well researched. But the key element that they feel in terms of dissatisfaction is the support they receive, and they'd like us to look at the academic advising system and see whether it's actually delivering. I think the fact of the matter is that we are having students with more severe problems, and we are putting quite a few measures in place to help support students. For example, we could talk about the mental health initiatives. But I think also in Fatima's paper there are a series of recommendations, particularly around estates, where students would like to see investments taking place. They also very much want to have more choice through University College for Interdisciplinary Learning, which is a challenge for some parts of this university. So it's a wide-ranging paper, and we've agreed to turn it into a series of action plans that we can address.
But of course, I mean, when we talk about students, everybody thinks about undergraduate students. I mean, we have a large number of postgraduate taught students and a very large number of PhD students, and they often have different concerns, and the surveys are not as robust there. The response rates are low, aren't they? But we know there are concerns. don't know if you want to comment on PhD students, Colette.
Well, we have the PRES survey, which picks up for PGR students. It's got a lower response rate, like the NSS. It has some dubious measures within it, but we work with the PGR students and research representatives through Manchester Doctoral College to pick up their issues. Their issues are typically around hot desking versus personal space, training and preparing for the next career stage and so forth.
I think what's particularly welcoming about Fatima's paper is that it illustrates that our students have a more rounded understanding about what value for money means in a higher education, unlike perhaps OFS that seems to be taking a cost-based approach to hours spent in a classroom, so curricular activity, whereas our students understand that their experience is not just curricular, it's co-curricular and it's extracurricular. It's what we provide for them in terms of opportunities for recreation, for well-being, for other types of support. And I think that rounded approach by our students is to be really welcomed.
Yeah, just don't want to prolong it too long, but just to add, I mean, in the Auger report, I was really disappointed that they criticised universities for spending quite a lot of money not directly on teaching. Well, yeah, of course we do. We spend it on counselling, we spend it on libraries, we spend it on IT support, we spend it on sports facilities, Students' Union, lots and lots of things that students feedback they really value. So they don't just come to a university to get a degree. Any other? Got a few minutes yet? Nobody's asked about search or RRE yet. Didn't provoke them.
There you go.
Hi, Jane.
I'm Jane Ratchford, I'm from the DSE. It was great to hear you, Nancy, talk about USIL and ethical grand challenges as real positive elements of the student experience. As someone who's been involved with those two initiatives and Stellify over a number of years, I'd welcome your views on the extent to which we are successful in implementing policy evenly across the university, because if we look at the stats for engagement with those, they can differ significantly across schools and faculties.
You're absolutely right. And there are some parts of the university that still tell us there is no room in the curriculum for this. And we say, what, one day in Welcome Week? And actually most of USIL is now online. So those arguments, I think, have been dispelled. So I don't think we only have one dean. Do you want to comment, Martin?
I think the best way of expressing is saying mea culpa. I think you make a very important point. We're working on this. It goes back to a previous question about added value for students. Some of our curricula and student load is particularly high in science and engineering, and we need to look at that. And we are doing so in terms of freeing up time for our students to do other types of courses. So I think your point is extremely well made. You're pushing on an open door as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. 5 minutes left. Any other questions? Yes, one towards the back.
Hi, Martin Blake from Estate Safety. I noticed in the results up there you mentioned stress being a concern. Is there going to be some collaboration between the business school and professional services to use the expertise across the university to look at how we can better improve stress management?
I don't know if you want to comment, Karen. I'm not sure about business school necessarily, but yeah. Or do you want to comment?
Yeah, I don't see why
You've looked
not.
at Erasmus, haven't you?
I think there's a general issue we don't actually tap into the expertise and the knowledge in the business school in general terms. It's there, it's on our doorstep. So I think the answer to your question is yes.
Did you want to add, Colette? Because you've been particularly looking at...
It's simply to add that we do have some of the leading experts in the world in a research setting on stress in the business school, also in social science around work and occupational health, and reaching into BMH. So there is some capacity there to mobilise. We've talked about this in various other training forums. We use our academic knowledge in a number of forums, and I think this one's a very timely one to pick up.
So it's also timely that this is not university specific, but it's city region. Any of you who has any knowledge of social determinants of health, i.e. stress relation and so on, will know the name Michael Marmot. He's a very major figure globally, and he's advising Greater Manchester on how we limit impacts of stress. Now, sometimes you can argue, well, it's workload, but he's also done an awful lot of work on resilience. In other words, how people respond to different workloads is very, very different, and if you can bring in some resilience, that can be very valuable. And of course, Kerry Cooper does a lot in this area. We've probably got time for one more. No? Last question. I'm going to say going on in a minute. If you've got... Yes, there's one over there. That's our last question over here.
Martin Coram, Technical Operations Manager for Physics and Astronomy. We're having massive investment in MECD, GEEK and the other campuses and buildings. Are we going to continue with putting money into the old buildings? Ours is a bit decrepit now. Bit unfit for purpose, to be honest.
Yeah. So, first of all, there are different things there. GEEK's entirely externally funded, so we didn't put money into it, just like NGI, we didn't put any money into it. So we have put money into our buildings. The Alliance Manchester Business School is a fabulous example if you want to go and have a look. Major refurbishments of some of the old buildings, and just this morning we were in Coupland 3, and despite a flood that happened after it, it is a spectacular refurbishment with all the old features. There are more. Yeah, we could go on, and it's how deep are our pockets, but...
Yeah, and I think there's a connection back to what Steve was saying earlier about financial sustainability. You know, if we're only generating operating surpluses of about 2.5%, we're not going to be generating the cash to reinvest in our facilities. And I think that's really the challenge that we face. You know, we spend 25 million a year of revenue in long-term maintenance. We could really be spending twice that, ideally.
Yeah. A great example, if you're from physics and astronomy, is the Schuster Extension, which is lovely. It is really. Yeah. Yeah.
No airflow. It's not a nice place to work.
Yeah. No. Yeah, and we've got lots of spaces that need to be improved. So I think it's time for us to let you go. I'd like to say, on behalf of all of us, thank you very much for coming and thank you for your questions. We would welcome your feedback, whether this has been worth an hour of your time, whether the format is a good one, is it too big, or is this fine, how frequent you would like to have them, or if you'd like them to run a different way. So thank you all very much indeed.
Yeah. Thank you.
I knew it would.
I think it's about 20. He's probably the only 6
as well.
It is, but...